McNulty here. She'll be giving our gallery talk today. She was a juror, and she's going to go through some of the pieces that were in the show. I do ask that everybody mute themselves. So the mute button is on the bottom left of your Zoom, and everybody needs to be muted. Okay, if you could all take a moment to mute yourself, the bottom left of your Zoom, you'll see something that looks like a microphone, and you want to mute yourself. Okay, thank you so much. We will, if we have time at the end, we'll have a short question and answer. So if you want to put your questions in the chat, we can look at those at the end if there is time. So I will hand it over now to Barbara and enjoy the gallery talk.
Thank you so much, Robin. I'm going to take a moment to share my screen now, so I have the PowerPoint up.
All right, let me.
I think it looks like I can. Can everyone see that?
Yes. Oh, terrific.
All right, great.
Oh, nice.
And I'll put it from the beginning. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am looking forward to our talk today. I thought that since most of you don't know me, I would introduce myself by providing a bit of my background. But before I do, I wanted to apologize for the delay in awarding the prizes. It's an important part of an exhibition like this, and I'm sorry you weren't able to announce the award winners at the opening. And I'd like to thank Dina Lincoln, who first asked me to participate, and Robin Stone and Bo Dernbach for inviting me and for their assistance. Thank you so much. When asked to be a juror for the Philadelphia Tri-State Artists Equity Group, I was honored. I owe my beginnings in the art world to two such organizations in the Harrisburg area, the Art Association of Harrisburg and the Mechanicsburg Arts Center. These types of organizations are very important for fostering talent and adding to the cultural life of the community. I entered many shows, and one of my paintings was a purchase award for the State Museum of Pennsylvania in the State of the Art exhibition, and is in the permanent collection there. As a matter of fact, they're now having that exhibition. I'm not sure whether any of your members might be in the show this year. You can raise your hand if you want. But anyway, it was a wonderful opportunity. Another part of my background was through my volunteer efforts in our local school district, running the Art Goes to School program, that I realized I wanted to teach art history. And so I went on to receive my PhD in art history from Temple University, not far from where a lot of you are located. And at the time, I was 50 years old and commuted to Philadelphia from the Harrisburg area. I specialized in Byzantine art and the study of the history of portraiture. I currently serve as director of the Suzanne H. Arnold Art Gallery at Lebanon Valley College and have taught art history courses about medieval art, portraiture, and currently am teaching museum studies and the history of the photograph. And I bring up my background as a way of showing how it can often be through our volunteer work that we can find our vocation. And this is something I stress with our students. And so I'm hoping this can be a conversation about the work in the exhibition and some of your backgrounds. A little bit about how I approach jurying an exhibition. There are three main things I like to keep in mind when jurying. One is technical ability. That's very important. the aesthetic experience of the work, balance, harmony, color, types of aesthetic perception in the production of art that I think is so important. And also the concept. What are the conceptual ideas behind the work? And so in thinking about that, those three things, there is another sort of layer to that, and that is uniqueness. When you approach a still life, it can be beautifully executed, but, is it done in a way, something that we haven't seen before, or adds to some kind of conversation for the viewer? So there are certain motifs that are common and they need to have a special quality to make an impact. The other thing I think about is when I'm looking at the large body of work is what diverse element might it add to the show? If there are several examples of one type of thing, I like to choose one and then go on and provide the most diverse kind of show that I can. I consider the whole show as a curated exhibition and think about how these works will hang with each other and how the viewer will interact. And to that end, I try to include a wide range of media in terms of examples of kinds of art making, sizes, and how the works will hang together. But, try as a juror might, it is difficult to be totally objective in the sense that we too are viewers, and certain colors, ideas, and media appeal to our senses. We too are having an interaction with the art, and we bring our own experiences. And so, for instance, for me as an art historian, titles are very important whenever I'm teaching art. We always have the artist's name, the title, and so forth. And if a title seems too cliche, even though the painting may be executed well, that's sort of off-putting to me. So an example of this might be a still life of a cup of tea and toast and so forth. And so to call it Tea for Two would, that I'm not sure that I would decide to have that as part of the exhibition. It's also important to think about how the work is framed or displayed. Sometimes it's better not to frame an artwork, to have the art stand alone, depending on whether it's a work on canvas. Of course, with watercolors, often and works on paper, they need to be under glass. There's always a problem in showing work that's under glass, that you have a reflection, and museum glass, art glass can help reduce the interference of that kind of thing. I realize that's very expensive, but anyway, these are all things to think about. And so remember, it's the work that needs to stand out, not necessarily the color of the matting or how you have matched the frame. And the other thing is, I love it when I have to look up a word in a title to help me gain understanding to work. These are sort of the artist's special clues as to inviting us to think about the work. And so I always think that's sort of fun. So before I begin the presentation itself, I first want to say that I thought the show was outstanding. It was such a wonderful cross-section of contemporary art. And it was my first visit to the Wallingford Community Arts Center. And it was such a gorgeous venue to have the work. And so I definitely will plan to visit. I think I was there right before the art show or the craft show that you had, and I wish I could have made it to that. I think it was the following weekend, but anyway, hopefully it's not my last visit there. I really enjoyed seeing the show. And so in deciding what to include in the show, I tried to present a wide variety of topics to have discussion for viewers, especially one of the things you might think about are current issues that in our world today that people are struggling with. And this show was no exception in that. We had this really dynamic sculpture of COVID, and we had another sculpture made out of metal concerning addiction. And I'm sorry, I just need to move how my screen looks so I can see this. Okay, I'm seeing everybody. Now I can see the painting. And then we have this painting after 9/11 that presents the haunting trauma that is still with us from 9/11. And so I appreciated that as a contemporary show, it explored these issues. There was also another work that unfortunately I didn't have an example of when I was taking my photographs that alluded to the disappearing bird population. It was an abstract, and I thought that was really interesting as well. I also wanted to highlight this image from a digital smartphone for a number of reasons. One, the topic, mural painters, I think it draws our attention to the importance of mural art and public arts programs and how they encourage the development of our cities and tourist attractions. And especially it's such a thriving program in Philadelphia. So I couldn't not show an example of that. I also like the touch of humor that it exhibited, because as you see it, you see this hand sort of surrounding the mural painters as they are on the scaffolding. And certainly by having a work taken with smartphones sort of highlights new technologies that we are using in our art. Now I show this example, the graffiti wall by, let me see, Virginia Conover, because it sort of highlights for me my own experience. When I first came to Philadelphia and was going to Temple, I would be riding SEPTA underground, and I was struck at the time by all of the graffiti as we were passing through stations, and you'd see light, and then you'd see these mural paintings on the wall. And so it was vivid to me, and also in particular because I was studying frescoes and paintings on churches. As a matter of fact, my specific study was the churches of Cyprus. So I traveled there and spent several months on Cyprus photographing the interior of churches. And so on the left, I wanted to include some of those images just to give you an idea of how that idea of painting on walls, sort of resonates with me. And of course, if you look at the history of art, going back to cave paintings, there's something about man wanting to put imagery on a surface. And so this work was striking to me in that way. And so I share this, as I said, we all sort of have our own interests that tie into jurying a show. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the exhibition from where you enter. And I sort of went to the left and went in a circle. So our tour will be in that direction. I want to say I do not have images of every work in the exhibition. And the award winners will not be presented in order. I will be presenting them as we sort of take our own tour of the exhibition. And so I'll announce them as we come to their location in the gallery. And if you have a question, maybe if you want to type it in the chat, we can look for your questions there. So here we have our entrance with the work Dvorak's Dilemma. And I thought this was really wonderful to sort of begin the show this way. To me, actually, as I was putting the PowerPoint together, I think of the dilemma of a juror and thinking of Dvorak's Dilemma. But I would like to know, not being a musician and knowing a lot about music history, I'd like to know more about the background of that title. But as we move into the show, on that first long wall, we had a group of paintings that I just thought were so rich, and the colors so beautifully. And I'm not sure who installed the exhibition, but I just felt that the installation was just lovely. I love these greens and the different ways of application of paints. It was just so aesthetically beautiful. And so the first work I wanted to spend just a little bit of time talking about is work titled Letchworth by Heidi Denke Fisher, I believe would be the pronunciation. Her oil on canvas titled Letchworth. It struck me because we had received a gift of 45 landscape paintings to our gallery, which we now have in our permanent collection. And these were from the Hudson River School of Artists. So if you are familiar with that school, more of a naturalistic approach to painting, sort of a romanticized approach from the 19th century. I chose this just because I feel this painted in this sort of abstract expressionist way is a wonderful example of contemporary rendering of the landscape. And of course, in art, we can divide the genre we often into landscapes, figure painting, still life, and conceptual works. And so the two works I'm displaying now, I think, are really great takes on contemporary views. And the work Winter by Leslie Brill, in her sort of minimalist rendering, just evokes the sense of winter, by using a very minimal color scheme with the browns and whites and grays. It's just this nice suggestion. And then to continue through the exhibition, I think there was a really wonderful transition then, especially with this geometric work called Links by Lois Schlachter, to give us a more geometric kind of rendering. And then as it moved into works that featured textiles, that's an interest of mine. I actually began as a home ec major interested in textiles. So I always sort of am drawn to how artists might use weaving and textiles in their work. And you can see the work on the right by Ellen Carver, Spring Was Different This Year, using handmade paper and vintage fabric. Thinking about vintage fabric, and we see it in a number of the works using recycled materials, I think, sort of really addresses a consciousness with trying to be kind to the environment as well in our art making. And here we come to one of the prize winners in the show, second prize, Gloria Clayman, her Field of Poppies. I have the total work on the left-hand side of the screen. And then on the right, I have a more detailed image so you can see it a little better. There were a number of things that I felt really made this work stand out. I liked her using, I feel, and I'd love to have a discussion with her about it, more of an Asian inspired aesthetic in this work. Thinking about poppies and how you can see them rendered in black, almost a sort of calligraphic type, loose gestural kind of brush stroke that we would think of, in terms of Zen paintings. Might give us a feel for that. And then what she does is she sort of juxtaposes that with these geometric, very hard edge encasements of the poppy. And then layered on top of that, these gold threads, which, sort of provide a preciousness to each object that she's shown. And then finally, how she arranges each of these poppies in a very perfectly arranged way, sort of following the golden means of balance and so forth. And then over underneath all of that, we have these sort of grasses as textures, and you can see how they're organized in squares as well. Some of them are sort of vertical dry brush strokes, some are horizontal, and so it makes this wonderful play and pattern. I just thought was really strong for a number of different reasons. And then moving on to the back wall, we have, as honorable mention, Mutual Harmony by Rochelle Myers. And again, I show it with the works that are beside it because I think, it's just a wonderful pairing and creates an interesting dialogue between how Rochelle has sort of geometrically constructed a figural painting, and then, of course, these abstracts that we're thinking of more of the formal elements of line, pattern, and design. And so we could think of this mutual harmony in a number of ways. We can think of it as the balance of the gold background, the black foreground of the figures, and the way she's created the figures as sort of one unit gives their mutualness. But it's almost like you could sort of flip the background with the foreground in terms of the outline of this work. really interesting, and the way she composes the figures, that they're all one unit. And of course, you know, there are sort of traditional methods of portraiture that are being shown here, the sort of frontal view and more of a side pose with the female. If you were to look at sort of traditional ways of portraying husbands and wives, if you look at older photographs and paintings, often the male is at a higher level than the female and so forth. Those are other things that could be discussed with it as well. All right, and so I am moving on, just here again, this wonderful pairing of these works. And moving around the corner and I wanted to show these works paired together, but it is the one on the left that was awarded first prize by Alan Sulphur, The Open Door, and Encaustic and Oil. It's interesting to look at this. First of all, I think the size of it really helps with telling the story, at least to me, how it resonated. You know, as you're moving, you can move a number of different ways, beginning at the bottom, thinking of tunnels, openings, stairways, cracks, caves, portals, organic forms, all of these, you know, somehow to me sort of it can be from the ancient past to the future in looking at this. And from, as I said, very organic forms. If you look on the left-hand side, we have the vertical with the lights. So we have a suggestion maybe of man-made forms in it. And so it, you know, just is this really interesting work, and at the same time looking at the technical ability of the artists, the brush strokes, the fine lines, the very sophisticated kind of color harmony, and incorporating all of these elements into a unified whole, or integrated whole, I should say, is really interesting. The other thing that I wanted to mention in looking at different types of media, I mean, we had a lot of different painting media exhibited in the show, but I also like the fact that encaustic was used in this work. It's one of the most ancient forms of paintings. You may be familiar with the ancient Fayum paintings of mummy portraits. You can see them in the museum. It's one of the oldest forms of painting. And for me, as a Byzantinist, some of the earliest icons were made with encaustic. So it's this ancient form of painting that lasts a really long time. Unfortunately, some of our more contemporary methods of painting and materials that are being used do not have that kind of longevity. They're more ephemeral, and a lot of museums have you know, sort of issues, you know, how do they preserve a lot of these works made out of, you know, maybe more fugitive kinds of materials. So here we go. And then as we're moving on, we see these wonderful blues working together, a number of different ways. I think here we have a color theme, but we have a very geometric sort of still life on the left, a more abstracted work in the middle, as are the two on the right. And the one on the upper right has layers of fabric. So again, interesting materials being used. And I want to keep an eye on our time. I have some other interesting, more abstracted works. And this is our other honorable mention. I mentioned Mutual Harmony. We had 2 honorable mentions. And this is Sacred Space by Susan Goldstein. And, of course, when we look at a title, sometimes that may give us a clue. And of course, Susan has titled this Sacred Space. So then I begin to think, okay, how do I think of sacred space or materials? And so I immediately in looking at this, I think of, maybe when you see it at the bottom, a bit of a scroll tied with string. Is it an ancient papyrus that, some of the earliest forms of writing would have been on that? Some of the sacred texts, they would have been in a scrolled form. And yet at the same time, we see this thread sort of coming through the center. And to me, that gives a suggestion of bookmaking in the sense when we were beginning to bind codexes with thread and binding them together. I've been thinking about that a lot lately because currently we have an exhibition at our gallery on children's book illustrators, and we've been doing workshops on bookmaking and showing students how to thread, how to stitch a book together. I wasn't doing that at the time that I juried this, but anyway, it's been interesting how things can come together. And I'm not sure if this was a suggestion as well, but it was after I had thought, yeah, I feel like, the space around it, alluding to maybe the materials. And yet, as I got back from it, I thought, oh my, is that maybe a suggestion, a symbol of Christ on the cross? I'm not sure if that is what maybe she's suggesting, but I got that sense from it as well. And or maybe a prophet, as we would see on the door jambs of some of the great cathedrals. Here, as we move to the third large wall, I was struck by that center image by Libby Sofer. I can maybe show you with my pointer the constructing of a self. I thought that was interesting, using a pattern to be able to do that. Also, there were some really wonderful photographs on this wall that I really enjoyed. I'm sorry I don't have a larger image of some of them. In particular, the photograph of Santa Rosalia Mission Church in Moquino, New Mexico. I just thought that was really well done by John Menigno. Just capturing the loneliness, evoking the area and this mission church and the sepia tones that were used, I thought were really interesting. So, let me see. Okay. And then in the last section, this is our third prize winner by Matthew Schley, 2 questions, his ink on paper. I apologize for not having a better photograph of this, and hopefully you can see, and that you had an opportunity to see it in the show. But in some ways, I felt this work really deals with the whole question of art. And now he calls it two questions. And so I'm not really sure maybe what he's referring to as the two questions. But as I look at it, I'm thinking of sort of two maybe alternate questions. It could be a balance of the gestural line with writing, the very calligraphic line, playing against the blue and sort of an ochre painted areas with a paintbrush, letting the water of the watercolor bleed a little bit. Also, maybe the opposites of the geometric forms with the more organic flowing kinds of forms. It also made me think, of yin and yang, sort of identity of opposites. I liked the gestural quality of it, which, shows the skill in getting the balance of this. I also like some of the bleeding of the handwriting. And so, I think of a more contemporary, our artists like Cy Twombly and some of his sort of script-based gestural paintings. I feel like each line and color is infused with meaning. And in a sense, I think gets at the very nature of painting and art making when you think about text and imagery, balances of cool and light and different types of shapes. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that maybe at the end. And then on the final walls, we had some interesting works that ingest some color, some humor, of course, with the pig. And I also enjoyed the sculpture of the 12 labors of Hercules. I always think it's interesting to allude to historical ideas and productions as well. So on that note, I just wanted to, maybe emphasize the beauty of the building, that these artists had a chance to exhibit their work, and maybe open it now to questions or thoughts.
Well, thank you, Barbara. That was fantastic. That was just wonderful to hear your very unique and educated perspective and bringing it to the show. It was really informative. So I didn't get any questions in the chat. We can see if particular artists are here who's you had mentioned you might want some more background on. If you want to ask that, and if anyone does have a question, please, now would be a great time to put it in the chat. The chat is right below the screen, and it says chat. So, and if not, then if you would like Barbara to ask if some of the artists are here whose work you wanted to know a little bit more about, that would be.
I was just wondering, I'm sort of scrolling through, I was wondering if Matthew was here, since I just spoke about that, but I can go back to another work.
Yeah, I am here.
Oh, okay.
I guess I would say the two questions, it's just a lot of my work now is about that, how writing or just the that calligraphic thing is somehow connected to just the sort of the nervous movement in calligraphy, and then just contrasting that with, I guess, sort of a more solid visual plane or something. And just, it's sort of like the conflicts between those things. A lot of my work has to do with conflicts and contradictions in art making.
Also, has a lot of application to today's society as well.
Yes, yes, a lot of my work does have to do with me reflecting on both the world at large and just, my life too, just the contradictions that are just inherent in things.
Have you always worked in this way, or
No,
I'm
I've been
curious
doing
about the
a lot
evolution
like
of your?
No, I've done a lot of different types of work. I've done work like this before and I move away from it and I become more realistic sometimes. And then I move back to a more abstract way. So but recently I've been doing work like this. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, thank you. I'd like to talk longer, but maybe I'd like to give the opportunity for some others as well right now. But thanks for sharing, Matthew.
So we have one question about,
Yes.
and a comment actually, in your own background. I know that you mentioned you started as an artist and you have a piece in the State Museum Permanent Collection. Actually, one of our members just mentioned that he too, the one who did
see that.
Dvorak's Dilemma, also has a piece in that. So that's kind of cool. And are you still making art today, or are you really focusing 100% on art history?
I'm focusing 100% on art history. Been doing we do a lot of projects with our students, that type of thing, but not my personal work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so other artists who, I think you had a question about Alan Safa. Alan, are you here?
Yes.
Okay. So Barbara, what question did you have about his work? You had some, you wanted to get a little background on what his thoughts were in it.
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering how you approached that work. Was it something that evolved, and what did you think about as you were creating it?
A little befuddled. I'm trying to remember what piece I have in the show.
It's large.
It's a real large piece, I believe.
The orange, yes, the open door.
I'm sorry, what?
The open door.
Oh, the open door. Thank you very much. That's
Yeah.
Well, the open door was a work that was in progress for about 8 years. I had done it. It looked pretty good. I don't know if I showed it anywhere previously, but I became dissatisfied with it. And that happens to me quite a lot anymore. And so I reworked it. And I think it came out positively, the reworking. Sometimes you screw it up, but I think this came out positively. And I was kind of thinking that life is kind of an open door. You don't know where you're going next. You step through one opening and you're into another dimension, another world, another group of thoughts are going through your mind. And so that it was kind of thinking about sort of meditation and discovering new things. That's about all I can say. It's not any more specific than that. That was how it evolved. But it evolved over a long time, and it was a struggle finding a solution.
I like, thinking about going from one dimension to another. And I know my grandchildren talk a lot about, oh, you go through the portal. So that's what I'm thinking about with that.
Right, the portal. Exactly.
Anyway, yeah, thank you. And also, is Susan Goldstein here today? Just curious. Or Gloria? Well, maybe we could, since Jim is here and he mentioned Dvorak's Dilemma. What is Dvorak's Dilemma? That's what I was sort of wondering what your intent was with that.
Okay, this is Jim. My video doesn't work. he was teaching two sisters the piano to make money. He was very poor, and he was in love with one, and he wrote that piece for her, but she rejected him. So, and married a rich guy. And so he was also teaching the younger sister, and somewhere along the line, he impregnated her and then ended up marrying her. And that was his dilemma. He didn't actually marry the woman he was in love with, but it all worked out because the marriage worked. And in the end, they all vacationed together.
Okay. So it was a more of a social dilemma than a musical, philosophical dilemma.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Anyone else want to make a comment I'm just sort of.
I have a question. That's Libby Soffer. I was just coming from the Brandywine Museum. That's why I just got in on the Zoom. Could you very quickly let me know what I missed? And if there's anything that's needing to be said, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Well, I think, so Libby, it would be great if you could listen to the recording, because we've all heard the entire wonderful
Didn't know there was a
gallery talk. So when you hear the recording, you will hear everything you missed.
Okay.
Alan, you did win first prize. I don't know if you missed that, but you did.
I did miss that. Well, thank you very much. I'm very appreciative.
So, well, if there's no other questions, this was just absolutely fabulous. Really appreciate all the work you put into it, and Barbara, and going to Wallingford and seeing the work in person, because we do feel that that's very critical to awarding prizes and to really understanding. I loved how you really thought about how the show was laid out. We can't take credit because they do lay out the show there at Wallingford for us. But I appreciate that you looked into that and you saw it, and it was clearly laid out really beautifully. And that you were looking for the kind of dialogue between the works, and looking at the show as a whole, as well as focusing on your very interesting thoughts about several of the pieces that you discussed. So thank you so very much. We're really indebted to you for this wonderful experience. As far as artist equity goes, I just want to put the word out once again. If anyone else would like to volunteer to help us out, that would be fantastic. And our next show will be this spring at the Henry Gallery. And we're very much looking forward to that. So that's going to be a show in portraiture. So start painting today. And we look forward to being back in touch with you soon. And thank you also, Bo, for all the work you've put in to helping us with everything from communication to getting the show set up to basically everything. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful
It was a joy
evening.
to be here with you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Very good.